My dude,
Lay it
I
on
was
me.
on the fence for last week's episode. I liked it, but it
Okay.
wasn't like the best.
Okay.
I adored this episode, man. Like
Did
they
you
got me right back in. Yeah.
really?
Where are you? Are you? Because I'm worried.
I'm like, I'll give it a. I don't know. I was kind of torn in between a few things. I'd give it like a solid like. See, I feel like a 7's too low, but an 8's too
Mm.
high, so I'm gonna go 7.5 out of 10.
For me, I felt like personally this was like the most action-packed episode we've had. Am I wrong there?
No. Well, no, I guess not. It was pretty action packed. I mean,
Yeah.
pretty much from the beginning.
Yeah. In a galaxy
Yeah.
far, far away.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. So how do you feel now? I know last week you were a little wore down from the week, wearing on you, and you felt like you may have had a bad attitude going in the last episode. Do you feel like after rethinking things, as we do, we kind of record these right after the show, but sometimes the week goes on and we hear things, theories and things. Do you feel better about the Hu Yang saying that?
I do. I definitely do.
Okay.
And I will put this on record. When I edited our podcast, I was like, I sound like a bitch. I was like, I'm being really negative right now. And like the episode was not that bad. And when I was editing our podcast, I was like, this was a solid episode. Like I really liked it. So yeah,
last week.
Yeah, I think it just I think being on the road for like 2 weeks straight, not seeing my family, watching it from a hotel room, eating crappy food, it's just that gets
That'll
to you.
do it to you. That'll do it to you. I understand.
Yeah. But I'm this week, man. I'm back in. I'm on the Ahsoka train. Choo choo.
Yeah.
Choo choo.
No, it's a good episode. I really enjoyed the episode. So we'll get into why I didn't like the episode as the episode progresses, and I might kind of explain a little bit of it. But I mean, opening scene. What is it with Hera? We got
Trial of Hera Syndulla.
So I'm gonna say this. So during this entire scene, this Xiono guy, I know that like we had a discussion where like, dude, this guy's totally like a bad guy, and in our video, people were like, no, like Xiono's part of the council, like he's always there, has always been there. I don't really necessarily know where he's from, or apparently he's already been there, but dude seems just super suspicious still to me.
Oh yeah.
I can't get over the fact he was either he's just that guy that takes his job way too seriously, or something's up.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think the comments were saying he's part of the Resistance cartoon, which no clue what that is. So we'll have to figure that out later on. Resistance cast or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't even know there was like a Resistance thing.
Yeah.
We're Star Wars fans. We're Star Wars fans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, my exact line for this whole scene was the Republic is filled with a bunch of idiots. I'm like, it's everybody on this council, dude. I'm just like, okay, not the footage of the rail yards where the Empire literally stole this hypersonic jet. Not the scans that Hera and the rest of the X-Wings got off this planet where clearly some crazy stuff was going down and we see them go off into space. Or not even just the fact that Moff Gideon took over Mandalore. Like the entire Republic is just like, oh, things are good. Things are good. I'm just like,
we wonder why there was an episode 7, 8, and 9. How that happened. Like,
yeah.
No, that was interesting when they mentioned that. They said Gideon's overtake of Mandalore. I was like, okay, so I mean, clearly Mandalorian season 3 takes place like either concurrently with this, like going on at the same time, or just takes place maybe just after. So I'm assuming, but we get our boy, all shiny and gold, walking in. I will tell you, I was not expecting him to be in this show.
Yeah, I mean, if we had like a bingo card of like who we were expecting to see, definitely would not have been on there for me.
I don't think he would have been on the card at all, which makes no sense because like it's obviously after episode 6 and he's around still, but it's like, when I saw him, just hearing him talk, I was like, oh my god, is that 3PO? And so then when they said it, and I was like, holy cow, man, 3PO, what's up, boy? So one thing I noticed, and I think we've discussed this before, maybe just like in person, me and you before, but obviously there's like a lot of like people saying they don't remember him having like a silver leg and that he was all gold. I felt like he was all gold.
I didn't pay attention.
I did. That was
I
one
was
of the first things I looked
fanboying,
at.
if I'm honest. I was just like, are we gonna see Leia? I was like, but like the thing is, like, it's such a clever use to not have to like deep fake Leia. Like it was just such a cool place because I see 3PO showing up for Leia, and one thing I wrote down was they called her Senator Leia Organa, and I'm like, what planet is she representing? Because last I checked, Alderaan blew up. Like,
oh my god, dude!
Like
too soon.
Senator
Too
Leia
soon.
Organa from Endor. You
know what?
What are you planning now? You know,
I think it's Endor. She stayed with all the fuzzy teddy bear Ewoks.
Yeah, I'm representing the Ewoks. What's on the agenda today? They're hungry for
cuddles.
Stormtroopers and cuddles.
They want Stormtroopers and cuddles.
Exactly. Yeah. But did you pick up on the chopper scene?
I saw him when he was like,
yeah. The guy was like, he made an insult to a droid, and Chopper was like, wah, wah, wah.
Yeah, like what the heck? Like, Chopper he wants to scrap, man.
Always.
He wants to fight anybody and everybody.
Hell yeah, man.
I was curious though, how did Leia catch wind? Like, how did she know was it the Force?
Ooh, I don't know.
Like, how did she know to save them through diplomatic means?
You got to assume there's spies everywhere, right? Okay. She's got like her connections. She has her people, right? I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's another thing too, as you said, you know, the people in the Republic, do you think it's just kind of like, because I feel like that's kind of true with any story. It's like, do you think they did it for the story of making these heroes be by themselves and not getting any support from the Republic? Like, oh, we don't want to believe, nobody wants to believe that, you know, so-and-so's back. Because I feel like that always happens in movies.
Yeah.
It's like all the evidence is there, and it's like they're always still being like, show us the evidence. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's right here.
Yeah, I saw a TikTok this week where a guy was like criticizing the scene, and he's like, they refused to give Hera any ships to go after Ahsoka, yet to capture Ahsoka and Hera, they sent like 3 Republic fleet ships. Right. And he was like, where's the logic in that?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's definitely an interesting thing.
Yeah, so then we find out that Leia obviously is on the Defense Council, and she kind of says like, I sent her out on this mission, so it's above all of your pay grade, and kind of like supersedes everybody. And there's a line at the end of it that I thought was so epic, where they basically come over to Hera, and she's like, how real is the threat of Thrawn's return? And I'm like, dude, you're building this villain up so well, in the sense that like, for people who may not know who Thrawn is, it's like everybody's afraid of him. It's like the people who do remember him are like, oh, this is a big deal, you know?
Doing a good job of kind of tying it all together. I mean, obviously with the original movies, you know, obviously the threat was at that time the Empire and the Emperor and everything, but now that he's gone, somehow Palpatine returned. But now that he's gone, it's like now there's a new threat, and it's an old threat. And again, somebody that hasn't seen it, I very much am picking up, you know, how fearful everybody is of him, and also how smart he is. Like you were saying, you know, he's very strategic, and I feel like they're doing a very good job of that every time they show him, that he's just constantly, his mind is just constantly in a process of what's my next move, what's my next 4 moves, what's my enemy's next 7 moves. Like he's constantly just looking ahead, and it's awesome. They're doing a good job of it.
Yeah, it's I love it, man. This series is so good. Like I left the room after I watched it, and I was like, I can't wait to watch this back. Like watch it all from like start to finish, all 8 hours of it, and just
they've done a good job so far.
And then even like the next scene, dude, we get Ahsoka training inside of a Purgle with Anakin Skywalker's hologram.
I got so excited because in my head I was like, obviously it's like one of those things where I tell you all the time, when things start happening, I try to guess what's going to happen next. And in my head, I'm like, is she imagining this? Like, he's clearly like a hologram. What the heck's going on? But then I quickly realized, and she kind of explained it, that it's just he had recorded like 20 of those messages for her. But one thing I noticed in the hologram message is he called her Ahsoka. And I don't think we had heard him call her Ahsoka, because the entire time during that amazing episode, a couple episodes ago, he kept calling her Snips.
Yeah, so. It's so that recording, we see it once before in Rebels, and
same
Ezra's
one?
watching it. Yeah, Ezra's watching that, and it's like his training video that's out there. And you get this really cool scene between
Dang.
like Ezra and Ahsoka where he's like, "This guy's one of the best lightsaber fighters I've ever seen," and she's like, "You should have seen him in person." Like,
I think I
this,
actually saw a TikTok of
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So you
And I
get
was like,
that
oh,
scene.
spoiler.
The part I had where I was like, first off, Anakin showed up and he was like in his Clone Wars gear, and
Mm.
I literally wrote down, I was like, "Are you effing kidding me?" I was like, "You're gonna give it to me 2 times in this series where I get to see Anakin like going back." But then she's like, "There's 20 more recordings, like you said," and you see her tuck it in that box, and I was like, "Hold up, hold up, hold up, hold up." I was like, Let's see some of those other tapes. Like, pull them out.
Pull those out.
We can wait. Thrawn can wait. Ezra, Sabine, they can wait. I want to see the other 19 tapes right now.
Yeah. No, it was really cool. It was really cool to see that dynamic between the two. And like I said, I saw the first season of Clone Wars. So I'm excited to get back into that. I mean, this show, if anything, has just made me want to go back and watch all of that. And I think that might be the same for other people too.
Mm-hmm.
Like people like me who are very much fans of Star Wars but didn't finish, Clone Wars, the animated series, or Rebels. Like I absolutely want to go back and watch both of those now because this show has done enough to get me super interested in what those have to offer.
Yeah,
So,
I'm 100% with you. Like, I've already watched Clone Wars, but I'm like, I want to watch it again. I want to finish Rebels. I'm like, I want, and I think we talked about it in a past episode, and I don't know if you said it but we were talking about how like this show was the best solution to get people to continue subscribing to Disney Plus because once Ahsoka's over, they're like, well, now I got to watch 8 days worth of Star Wars Clone Wars, and then I got to get into Rebels, and it's nuts, man. The
imagine if they like take them off. That'd be the dumbest thing.
I'd be heartbroken, man. I would be like, I think I'd cancel Disney Plus. I'd be like,
I think that's something they said though, that they would never remove anything from their library.
I'm banking on it, man, because like even on this show, we can talk about it on Scruffy, but like I want to dive into some of the absurd Star Wars stuff on there, like the Ewok celebration videos and just like the random stuff that's on there, and be like, we got to break that down. Like we got to have separate shows about like the Ewok TV show. Yeah. But we talked about action packed, and like literally I felt like from this next moment on, it was just nonstop. And so Ahsoka and Huyang are kind of in the cockpit, and they're like the Purgles are coming out of hyperspace, and you just hear, and they're in a minefield and it's blowing up. And dude, the scene of Ahsoka flying out of the Purgle's mouth, dodging the mines in the field and the explosions and everything like that, I was like, I feel like I'm watching a movie. And I felt like that was such a testament to where Star Wars is with their series now, that like I'm like, I can't tell the difference between a Star Wars movie and a Star Wars TV show anymore, and it's fantastic. It's so
that's
cool.
Props. That's some big props, because I felt the same way. I can't tell you they did such a good job of timing of the suspense of the Purgle opening its mouth, because in my head, like again, I tell you all the time, I try to envision what's going to happen or what I'm going to see, and the time of like them getting ready for the Purgle to open his mouth, ready to leave the mouth, and it's like all these explosions are going on. I'm like, what are we going to see? Like, what is going to be happening out here? Are we just going to see a bunch of dead Purgles? Like, what's going on? And I did not expect like a minefield. I thought it was going to be like a bunch of ships shooting at them or something.
Yeah.
So then when I see this minefield, I was like, holy cow, this is freaking sick. And it looked like such like a well-placed, perfectly like certain distant apart in every freaking direction mines that would like track and follow. I was like, holy cow, these things are insane. Like, I don't think we've seen that in Star Wars, and it was just super cool. I literally just wrote down minefield in Star Wars, very cool scene. I was like, this was so awesome. And
was there a part of you that was like, when did they have time for this?
Yes. So it's like, do you know how big of an area they were trying to cover? Like, they covered such a massive space, and those things I felt like were not that far apart from each other. Maybe like what, 20 feet? Maybe?
Yeah, maybe
more.
Yeah.
I don't know. The ship was able to kind of navigate through them, but it was like she kept having to dodge one every
and they were like
second. It felt like
as well.
Yeah.
And
then the Purgles are like, we're out. One thing before that though, when Ahsoka was talking to Huyang, he was like, making the comment like, how do you even know that they're going to drop us off, at the right planet, like let alone the same galaxy? Like, how do we know? And she's like, what do you mean? I just know. I just have this great feeling. And he's like, well, I don't know. And she's like, well, I wish you would have said that before. And he's like, I did. And she's like, no, you didn't. He's like, yes, I did. And he was getting like angry, and it was funny because like I was like, she's teasing a droid, and then he like caught on. He was like, you SOB, like you could tell he was. And like I said, it's just that personality that I feel like Star Wars gives to their droids is just such a great thing they do.
Yeah,
like you recognize sarcasm, which I feel like I don't know if C-3PO would.
No, it would go right over his head.
Exactly.
And Chopper would be like pulling out a gun at some point and just, you trying to mess with me?
He'd be like, you know what? You're out. You fly the ship then, all right? I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the whole dynamic between Hu Yang and like Ahsoka has just been so cool throughout the series. Like I'm a big fan of it, man. I'm a big fan of everything that this show's doing right now.
Next scene though in this episode, we get, your boy Thrawn playing chess.
Smurf Daddy.
Dude, he just straight up, like, you were so right. Like, I can't tell you how right you were in your description of him. And I think that every time I see him in scenes, when you're just like, he's so strategic. And you're like, he's not that he's like super bad villain. It's just he's so smart and he's so strategic. And you just emphasize that so much. And I was like, okay. And like, every time they freaking show him, he's creating some plan or having a reason for what he does, or even like you even made a comment that when he loses, he doesn't look at it as a loss. He looks at like what he could learn or gain from it. And it's like every time it shows him, he is talking in that manner. And every single time I'm like, man, Bryant was spot on that. Yeah. I think in this, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's super cool because like we've never had a villain like that, right? Like if you look at the history of it, it's always been so like reactive and so aggressive. And he's the first one that's like, hold up, let's plan this out. Let's see what we can learn. And like, that's so dangerous in itself that like, it's not just someone that you're like, oh, we're going to pull one over on the Empire. It's like, no, this dude is thinking about everything. And there was a scene that happened where he's like, finds out that Ahsoka was Anakin's apprentice. And he has this realization that he's like, oh, I know who Anakin is. And he's like, I know what I'm dealing with here. And I did have a moment where I was like, I wonder if he's underestimating Ahsoka, because he's like, I know who Anakin is. Anakin's aggressive. Anakin's very like shoot by the gun. I know that Anakin eventually becomes Darth Vader. So like, I'm aware of all of that. And I was like, is that going to be the downfall? Is he expects Ahsoka to behave the same way? But I didn't get that at all.
Does he know
throughout
that?
This episode? Yeah. So, there's a series and a book that comes out called Heir of the Empire, and I think they've even done like comics about it, where Thrawn and Vader are sent out on a mission together, and they basically like there's like a whole like rivalry going between it. Essentially, Anakin and Vader hate Thrawn. They're like, this guy's the worst. But like Thrawn learns so much about who Anakin is, and at some point he's like, oh, last time I saw this was with Anakin Skywalker, and Vader just gives him a look. And he's like, don't say that name. And Thrawn's like, oh, I got you. Like, I got you.
How does Vader give him a look like this?
yeah. Just stone-faced, It's that dad look. He doesn't have to say anything. He's just like...
just turns the helmet?
Yeah. No, he raises the visor, and he's like... goes like that.
I was wondering when you're like, gives him a look. I was like, how does that look? Is he just like this?
Yeah. Yeah. It's all you need, man.
Don't you talk about me like that.
Never say that name again.
I destroyed Anakin.
Yeah.
But
no, it's one of those things that I was like, oh, that's going to be the flaw. But I'm like, even then, he didn't underestimate her. He was like, I still need to, I still know who this is. Like, it was sick.
Yeah, no, it's super cool, and I like that out of a villain. To be honest, I mean, it's something where you as the viewer really try to think, okay, how are the good guys going to get out of this? If this guy's already thinking that far ahead, how are they going to get out of this?
Yeah.
Even if with the quote unquote good guys win, bad guy still seems to think he's won. Like, it's just so many things that he does and says. I'm like, man, that's crazy.
Yeah, there was a scene that I also really dug this episode where Sabine and Ezra are catching up, and Ezra's
in the Star Wars minivan.
Yeah, super kind of weird. Like, I didn't suspect those shells to literally be cars, but I was like, okay, whatever. Like,
bro, they straight up were cruising like it's such a slow. And I'm like, is this the Star Wars equivalent of a minivan? Like, they were just cruising down the street. And you know what made me irritated was seeing Sabine, like a typical teenager, with like her feet just kicked up on the dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was like, even in Star Wars they do this.
Yeah, and it's not like
me?
you guys have any urgency. Nothing.
That's true.
Not a ship that's about to depart in 2 cycles. Like,
Could you
what are we
imagine
doing here?
like a car accident with those things? Dink. Oh god.
Yeah, it also made me wonder, like, the size of them. Like, I'd love to know, like, the build of them, because inside they had one of the Noti turtles, and then they had the dog was inside of it,
Howler.
and then Sabine was sleeping inside of it, and I was like,
Yeah.
how big is that thing? You know,
Maybe it's like a RV.
maybe, yeah,
So
or maybe it's like
Star Wars.
the suitcase from Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and it's just
like Harry Potter, where
it's
bigger on the inside than it looks.
maybe.
Okay.
But there was a quote where Ezra is like getting caught up on everything, and he's like, "So you guys fought on Endor," and he's like going through it. And I was like, "Oh yeah, dude, you missed a lot. Like, where do we begin?"
Honestly, that was one of the moments where I was like, God, I gotta go back and watch these shows, man. Like, because in my head, like, again, it's that whole timeline thing where I'm like, I have to second guess, like, wait, what timeline is this? Because when they make comments like Organa and things like that, I'm like, oh yeah, it's after Return of the Jedi. And then when she was explaining that whole thing, so the Emperor's dead, yeah, and then it was like this, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, like he's been gone a long time, and that also made me realize that too, because I think from the beginning of this, based on the similarities of like scene for scenes that they do from Rebels that they did in the show to kind of tie off, I thought it was like a closer time period that he's been gone, but I guess not.
I think I read somewhere it's like 10 years.
Okay. Homie grew a 10-year beard.
Yeah. It's pretty short for 10 years, but so then after this one we get the Baylan and sorry, I wrote that wrong. I wrote Baylan and shit in my notes. Baylan and Shin. We find out that they've teamed up with the Raiders and like they're stalking Ezra and Sabine right now, which is dope, dude.
Yeah, and that's kind of where things started kind of going downhill for me.
Really?
Well, so kind of before that, so there was a couple things. So when Sabine and Ezra were talking, he had made mention. Oh no, not him. I'm sorry. Hu Yang had made mention to Ahsoka when they were like kind of chilling in that debris field. He was like, "How did they know we were coming? How do they know exactly where to place those mines?" And in my head, I was like, "How did they know?" And then we get the scene where, oh my gosh, Thrawn was asking the witches to locate Ahsoka. And I was like, that's right. That's how they knew they were coming, because they came to him and were like, hey, another Jedi's on the way. And I'm like, oh, snap. And then that whole scene with Ahsoka locating Sabine, obviously she was using the Force because the scouter or whatever wasn't working. And it was all, I felt like, did you think it was kind of coincidental that the witches found her as she was using the Force to find Sabine?
Ooh, maybe like the Force was like the signal that they caught on to.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
got you.
Are they using like the dark side of the Force?
I think
they always say
magic.
That. Well, that's what I'm saying. They always say that Jedi are like space wizards, and these are witches. So are they just like the dark side of the Force, and that's like the Force is the magic?
I've always looked at it as two separate things. Of like the witches not even having the Force. It's just like.
But that's what I'm saying. You've looked at it as two separate things, but what if it's the same thing?
Possible, yeah.
What if it's just the Force, but it's just the way that they worship it or whatever?
That, like, the Sith are witches because they're doing the dark side.
Wizards
because they're
dark wizards. Think about like Harry Potter, good wizards, bad wizards. Like this, Jedi are the good wizards, the dark side of the Force.
Yeah.
It's that encompassing energy, magic, like you said. Because how else would you explain somebody opening doors as a Jedi just waving their fingers? The Force, magic.
Yeah. I mean, the Force is magic. Yeah, that's how you would describe it.
Right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interesting. I guess somebody in the comments, if you're more in depth of like the histories of like the Dathomir witches, let us know. But like,
Maybe they're the first ones to tap into that, though. You know what I mean?
Well, and what's interesting is like the Night Sisters, right? It's like in Clone Wars, they like their magic was like this green mist that like could bring things back to life and travel through the galaxy and haunt people. And like I was hoping we would see that this episode, but like we just got like a red laser beam both times, and I was like, are we not seeing like the true magic? Yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of weird, but like I did, going back to that scene where like Ahsoka's trying to speak through the Force to Sabine.
Yeah,
I really liked that scene because I felt like it was so simple, but it also explained like the Force in a way that we've never seen before. In the sense that like Ahsoka is just like meditating and she's thinking and thinking, and then you see it hit Sabine and she feels it, and you're like, oh, so that's how the Force talking works. And like,
yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen it before, but I think, like you said, they did a very good job of pulling the audience in to how it feels, because even the audio like kind of was like quieting to how you would feel Ahsoka would feel, because like we've seen it obviously even in the first 3 movies. Like,
yeah, that's true.
They'd be like, Luke, father.
Yeah.
But that was it. It wasn't like this moment where it was super focusing on it. So
yeah, like in Return of the Jedi, there's that scene where like Luke's like, my father's on that ship, and Han's like, hey, like, let's calm it down, buddy.
Yeah, but that's I mean, we've seen it before, but just not to that level where it really pulled you in. So
yeah,
I mean, it was cool. But yeah, I don't know. That's just something that I feel like, they always say the directors don't put things together unless it's for a reason, or they don't show you certain things or focus on certain things unless it's for a reason. I almost feel like that was trying to say like, hey, we have the good side of the Force, we have the bad side of the Force. Bad side found the good side, and it was all the Force. And then immediately after that, we get Baylan and Shin, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
And again, like I'm saying, they don't show things unless it's purposeful. And now I'm like so conflicted because you got Baylan that's like, all right, we found him. Go kill him. Contact Thrawn and go kill him.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, what? You're not going to help me? Like, what do you mean? And he's like, nope. Your path is, I wrote it down. Your path drives you in one direction. My path lies in another, is what he said.
Yeah. And then he dropped the epic line of, kill Sabine and Ezra and take your place in the new empire. And I was like, damn, homie. Like,
and then he stops her and says, impatience for victory will guarantee defeat.
Hell yeah, man.
And I was just like, I feel so bad for Shin in this episode because I just feel like she's so, I don't want to say misled, but it's like, it's almost like she's being pulled in so many different directions.
Oh yeah.
Like she's confused on what she's supposed to be doing. And the mystery that Baylan is adding to all of this by him just being like, okay, you go take care of this. I got my own stuff to do. And she's like, what? Like, what do you mean? And like, even the past couple episodes, he's been very, we've gotten a little bit more background from him, but he's also been kind of very mysterious. And I told you, I felt like by the end of it, he might turn to the good side. And this episode kind of like almost confirmed that, but not at the same time. Like, I almost feel like Baylan is just out there to destroy the Force. Like he has this mission to just destroy the Force as a whole. Like,
yeah, it's interesting because like there's a line where like to what you're saying where Sabine is like, or not Sabine's, that Shin is so conflicted. Like even in the last episode, I saw somebody pointed out that she asked Baylan, she's like, do you miss the Jedi Order? And he's like, if she was a Sith and like a bad villain, she wouldn't ask about the Jedi Order. Like she considers herself a Jedi, and she even asks, am I a Boken Jedi? And he's like, no, I've trained you to be different. And like, again, it's like she's basically put in a position where he's like, I'm done. Like, you're on your way. Your training's complete. Go. And you can tell she's not ready. And there's even a scene later on where I was like, where's this going? And then she chooses a different direction. But I started to wonder if this was the moment where, because filming had ended when Rey passed away. So I was like, is this the moment where in editing they were like, can we piece this together to write him off without having to write him off? Because it did feel a little odd. Like it was just like, this was not the send off that I was wanting. And I'm still holding hope that we see him in the final episode. That we get to see what he's seeking or what he's going after. I don't think we're gonna see that, but I don't want this to be the final send off, especially for a character that I've just fallen in love with so much over the last like 7 episodes.
Yeah, and like I really enjoyed last episode because they were giving more backstory on him, and now this episode I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like maybe you're right, and it's like one of those things where there's one episode left. We have one episode to tie all this together, and I feel like it's going to go one of two ways. It's going to be left with just a bajillion more questions, and there's going to be more stuff in the future, or it's going to all end very quickly and very abruptly, and there's going to be some upset people, namely us. But I don't know. I mean, the whole mention of like the Mandalore thing and Moff Gideon, I mean, that was from Mandalorian. So, I mean, I even thought in that moment, I was like, yeah, Bryant was right on the whole Avengers style, bringing everybody together to fight a bad guy, Thrawn.
There's no assumption. I'm going to put it out there. And if I'm wrong, I'm 100% wrong, and I'll be mad next week. But there's no way Thrawn is dying at the end of next week's episode. No,
I don't see. Well, I don't want everybody to die. I was going to say, I think everybody lives after next episode, but I don't know.
Yeah.
This whole Baylan and Shin thing, it's just been such like a confusing roller coaster because I've been so excited for these two characters, and this episode really hurt that for me.
Bro.
What epiphany did you just have?
Well, writer's strike ended today, and I'm just throwing this out there. Lucasfilms, if you're watching, sign me up for the next movie. What if? So, granted, we're jumping a little bit in the story, but so Baylan tells Shin to go do her thing, and he rides off, and he is then left, and he's walking on his journey at the end, and then Shin runs away. What if in the final episode, Baylan is about to reach his goal, and he's confronted by Shin? And we have a Baylan versus Shin lightsaber fight where she's like, you betrayed me. You didn't prepare me. And she's like going after him. And like,
because that's what's so confusing about this whole thing, dude, is because like you said, the last episode, so like you trained a Jedi like me. And then he's like, no, I trained you to be something far greater. And then this episode, he's like, go take your power and be part of the Empire. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? So confused. So I don't know. Maybe. I mean, if that were to happen, that would be interesting, I guess.
She just like stabs Baylan or Baylan. Maybe, what if they stab each other at the same time? And it's just like
stomach stabbings.
Yeah, but they're dead this time. That's the end. I don't know. I'm holding hope that we see them, but I'm also just like, if this is the way we say goodbye to Baylan, I think it's going to upset a lot of people.
Oh, if this is the last time I see him, absolutely, I'm going to be very upset, especially the way it ends like that. Oh,
yeah. So, yeah, like jumping back a little bit. So Ezra and Sabine are confronted by Baylan and Shin, and then we see them with all of like the Raiders circling around them, and we get this like, I don't even want to say high speed, slow speed chase where they're like shooting each other.
I wrote down a nerdy Ninja Turtles play bumper cars.
Yeah. It's like, there was like, he's like, you don't have weapons? And like one of them is using like a little slingshot. I was just like,
one of them did chuck a pan, though. One of them chucked a pan at it. That was effective.
Yeah. And then we get this scene where like they get surrounded, right? And I'm like, oh, dude, this is it. Ezra is about to fight. He's going to get his lightsaber back, and we're going to see Ezra just go ham, because at this point, Ezra's a Jedi Knight, I would say. Well, I guess you can't say Knight, but like a Boken Jedi, I guess is what we're calling him now. But like, he just uses the Force, dude. And I was like, that's so sick.
Yeah. Have we ever seen that? Somebody just strictly just used the Force to fight?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, you got the blind guy who used the stick, but like, just use the Force, man. I was like, that's so sick. Like, he
was out here like being a Force Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
He was Force Jackie Channing these fools.
Yeah.
He was just like, bah, bah, bah. Ooh, they would just send him back. And I was like, dang.
There was a point where Shin comes swinging at him, right? And he uses the Force to stop it. And you can see the waves of the Force going through her blade. And I was just like, dude, this is so sick. Like, as much as I wanted to see him with a lightsaber and be like a typical Jedi, I was like, I love what we got. I'm like, this is cool. You know?
Do you feel like he was more advanced as a Jedi because he didn't have to use a lightsaber?
Yeah, 100%.
He was pretty much fighting her without a lightsaber, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a funny scene too when she comes up behind him and just swings at him and he ducks and it like singes his hair and he's like, oh, close one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought that
Yeah.
was like a funny scene, but
dude, that captured Ezra so perfectly. Just like the one-liners and all that type of stuff is like that's all Rebels is he's like this comedic, lighthearted Jedi. And there was even a line where Sabine and him are in the car and they see Ben and Shaylin, or Ben and Shin and Baylan, and they're like, "Is that your friends?" And he goes, "No, she's kind of like you, but less funny," or something like that. And I was like, "Perfect, dude."
Kind of like you, but yeah, is that what she said?
Lacks a sense of humor. Lacks a sense of humor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it was.
Yeah.
He's like, lightsaber, and she's like, oh yeah, and he goes, great.
And then we got Ahsoka versus Baylan Part 2.
Before that, we see Ahsoka jumping out of a moving ship onto the ground.
Yep.
That would hurt so freaking bad, and it looks so fake.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they're not going to have Rosario Dawson jump out of a spaceship, but I was like, they're going way too fast for her to jump out of this right now. And it wasn't like a superhero landing. It was like a like, oh man.
So I guess the reason I was cool with it is like in Clone Wars, there's literally a scene where she's coming down on Mandalore and she jumps out of a clone transport ship and like skydives from ship to ship and just fighting people on the roof, and then like lands on the ground and there's a big like one of the coolest scenes Ahsoka's ever in. So I'm just like, okay, like she's got a history of jumping out of ships, but still, it was kind of weird.
Right.
It was weird. I'm with you. She would have died.
Ahsoka fighting Baylan.
Yes.
This was again another scene that I was like really cool, but I was left conflicted at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So they get into this lightsaber fight, which I thought was a pretty solid lightsaber fight. Like her style also seemed a little bit different, like very, like you were saying, Gandalf the White-esque. Like she just seemed a little bit more at peace with things, and her movements were just a little bit more fluid, and it was like she was just like stopping things a lot more calm. Whereas their first fight, she was like, she was like just using almost like a lot of anger and stuff. But she just seemed more fluid and more confident in her fighting, I guess you could say. And even though like Baylan felt super confident himself, like he even said the line like, you cannot defeat me. And she's like, perhaps I don't have to. And then Hu Yang comes in with the rain and fire flares or something he does. And props to him, by the way, for just constantly outrunning these ships that are shooting.
Yeah. Hell of a pilot.
And he's like, oh, they're together again. Hopefully I live to see their reunion. But she takes off on his howler, and he's left there just kind of realizing, like, what do you think's going through his mind?
This sucks.
He's now on foot. Like, he got defeated, I guess. Outsmarted.
I don't know. I feel like at that point he's got his sights set on his mission, right? To get to whatever he wants. That he's like, well, that was inconvenient, but back to the journey, and walked off. And that's why I was like, okay, now that we're talking about the scene and breaking down, we have to see him next week. Like we got to see him in some sense of like what he's trying to get to or what he's trying to find. But like, yeah, because if that's the end and that's all we see of him, where he's just like disappointed and walking off, that's a terrible ending for that character, man. Like,
that's why when you were saying that's last week's scene, I was like, God, I hope not. That would be, man, I would be so angry. Like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I just don't know what's going on with him. I thought I knew. I felt pretty confident what was going on with him last week. And now I'm just so confused.
Yeah, definitely throw a wrench in where he was like, you got this.
Yeah.
And
I was like, what? You're not. And just the way he said it all too. He's like, contact Admiral Thrawn, kill Ezra and Sabine, and join your new spot, the Empire.
Well, and it's also like, one of those that, like, if Ahsoka would have killed him in that moment, I felt like it would have left a lot of like open, because I'm more invested on what he wants to find than like whether or not he lives or dies. I'm like, I want to know and I want to see what he's after. Like that's what I want, Yeah. I don't
Mainly
know.
because it hasn't been explained. Maybe if we knew what it was and he didn't succeed, that'd be one thing. But because there's so much mystery behind what his motive is now, I guess, or what his true stance is, since he is just essentially a mercenary, like
Yeah. This show has caused so many theories to be out there of like from like the absurd to the insane, like whether or not there was going to be retconning with the World Between Worlds, whether or not Star Killer was the one behind the mask of that random guy. And then there was rumors this week that he was going to find the father, the son, and the daughter of the Force and kill them all and like destroy the Force. And I even saw a rumor this week that Baylan is Obi-Wan Kenobi's missing brother that we hear about from Kenobi. And I was like, no, there's zero chance that Baylan is Kenobi's brother.
Can you imagine? That'd be nuts.
Yeah, it's like, oh, your brother, you don't know what happened to your brother, but he served in the Clone Wars with you and was part of the Jedi Order with you.
Was what did it say? He was a general or something?
Yeah. Kenobi
General's pretty high ranking.
Brother wasn't there.
Well, I guess they called all the. They called all the Jedi's general. Mm-hmm. What if that's why he was general? Because he was also a Jedi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he lived through Order 66. Like,
yeah, he did.
And now he's a mercenary. 66. Like, damn it, Bryant! You just opened up more questions for me now.
Animated series, bro. Let's do it. Writer's strike is over. Let's start scripting an animated Baylan series. We'll send it to Disney.
I'm telling you.
It all started here on the podcast. You heard it here first. Yeah.
So here's one thing I want to know.
Okay.
We got this scene of Thrawn, and he's looking at a bunch of dots, which I feel like with all this technology and stuff they have, they could do better than just a bunch of dots. Mm-hmm. He just notices that one's missing. And I just put, of course he would. And he's like, where's Baylan? Looking at all these dots. And I'm like, how do you know Baylan? What? Looking at a bunch of like circles bumping into each other. And he's like, one's missing. Where's Baylan? And I'm like,
there's like no footage of the battle. Yeah.
How did he know? And that's the thing too. Like, there was this like drone that was like spotting everything. Why can't it be like a camera? Like, I just didn't understand why it had to be a bunch of dots.
Yeah.
Anyways,
that didn't add up to me. But we get to that point in that Thrawn scene where you hit it on the head. Where like he's basically like, all right, call the troops back. Because he clearly sees like the battle's over, right? And Morgan is like, what are you talking about? Like, we've got to kill them. And he's like, no. And he's like, we're going to accept this loss. But he looked at it as like, it's a success because we're learning from our enemies. And on top of that, he throws in the wrench. He goes, winning this battle was never the true battle. We were trying to gain time to load this ship up, and now we have it. And I'm like, dude, this dude is such a great villain. And it's to the point of what you're hinting at, that if they kill him off next week's episode, I'm like, dude, you spoiled such a great opportunity to see this guy in Mando season 4, Ahsoka season 2, and then potentially the Filoni-verse Avengers movie that we get where they're all coming together. Like, yeah,
I'm just saying, he just was like, she lost time that she can't afford right now. And I'm just like, God, he's so smart.
Yeah.
And he's like you said, he lost the fight, but in his head he was like, well, I don't see this as a loss, I see this as a win. And I was like, man, dude, he just was thinking so far ahead. Like,
I love him.
And he was saying it the whole time, like, the most important part of this is getting off this planet. So
yeah, I saw some people critique
him.
Like the look of Thrawn from last week, where they're like, in the cartoon show he was jacked, and in this show he was a little pudgy. And I was like, really? That's what we're coming down to? Is like, this dude's been abandoned across the galaxy for 10 years and maybe didn't keep up his like sit-ups. Like,
maybe they didn't bring a starship with a gym on it. Like.
Yeah. Maybe the only source of food is really high in carbohydrates and he's just pudging out. Like, sorry, maybe he can't get protein, guys.
A couple extra cheat days. Like,
yeah. If you were abandoned in a galaxy with no hope of coming back, you'd have some milkshakes too, The internet, dude, is just so rude.
What, Castaway? So unrealistic. The dude was not continuously jacked after he got off that island.
Exactly. Yeah. I just thought it was so funny. I was like, come on, guys.
You want to know something I thought was funny? The little amount of Beskar, I'm assuming, that Sabine's wearing. How convenient it is that she always gets shot where the Beskar is.
Yeah.
Like, she had her back turned and she had a small piece on her back and it was like, dink. And I was like, what the?
Mm-hmm. And she's
She's not
blocking
wearing
lightsaber
anything
with it too.
I get that because that's, I mean, I guess I kind of get it, but like that's what Mando does too.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also like fully head to toe.
Yeah.
And she's just got like this tiny little piece of armor. Like
She
even her
also
shoulder
didn't.
pads, like
Yeah, she didn't have a helmet on. Just shoot her in the head.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Come
what I'm
on.
saying.
The training of these stormtroopers
Over.
are just dumb, dude. Yeah.
Well, hey, maybe those blasters aren't as easy to fire because Sabina's missing quite a bit of shots too.
I thought of you when I saw that scene that I was like, man, blasters just suck. Like it's such an inefficient form of weapon that I'm like, can we find something else? Like,
how uncivilized.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the episode wraps up where Ahsoka, Sabine, and Ezra are all together, and we get like this family reunion moment. And Ezra looks at all of his turtles, and I guess he's like, "We're going home." And I was like, "Are you bringing the turtles with you?"
That's what I was like. Are they all going on the ship?
I was like, "That's does not sound like a good idea," but that would be funny. Is like we open up in the next episode, and everybody's just crowded in, and there's just like a bunch of turtles there, and it's like, do we really have to bring them, Ezra?
Oh man, yeah. And again, right before that ending of that, we see Shin just facing Ahsoka, Ezra, and Sabine, and she just looks so lost. And in that moment, I felt so bad for her because I was like, she's just questioning everything. Like all these troops just left. She's the only one there facing these three, and they're like, release your weapon. And Ahsoka's even like, I can help you. What do you mean you can help her? Like, she's so conflicted. And now her master's off, just seemingly on his own path and just abandoning her, not bringing her along for whatever reason. Like all of this is just so confusing for her, I bet. And I'm just like, man, I feel so bad for her. Like,
yeah, I was kind of, when she said that, like she's like, I'll train you. I was hoping they would like shoot Sabine and be like, Bish, what? Like, you're gonna do what with this girl? Like, she's not getting on the ship. But yeah, so I guess the best way to end this is we got one more episode of Ahsoka left. Assuming that there won't be a season 2, right? So just throwing that out there. What is your prediction for next week's episode?
I am going to guess, based on this Avenger-style Filoni-verse that we're doing, that we are going to get Ahsoka and Ezra and Sabine and the turtles on the ship. Okay, that's the first thing I'm guessing. They are going to confront Thrawn. I feel like we are going to get some sort of Shin and Baylan confusion, and I think they are going to try to help the good guys, because I feel like Thrawn just has made it very apparent that he doesn't give a flip about them, and I think they're going to try to help them against Thrawn and his forces, but I ultimately think Thrawn is going to escape. And I feel like it's going to end with them stuck on the planet, trying to figure out how to get off.
Okay.
And then I think, like you said, I think Mando's going to have something to do with that later on.
So I see that happening. I do. But number one, Thrawn is living. Like, that's probably my biggest prediction. There's zero chance that Thrawn dies because there's too much hinging around him. Like, we don't know what those caskets are, why they're loading up the caskets. We still haven't even touched on that story. So it's like, if you killed off Thrawn, it's like, well, why were you guys loading those caskets up? Like, why didn't you just leave? Like, so that side of it is kind of like, okay, we can continue it. But then I'm like, when you start looking at the overall arc of like the Filoni-verse, is in Mando, cloning was such a major thing. It's like, okay, they're working on cloning. So are these caskets people we're going to clone and bring back? And it's like, is this the early stages of cloning Palpatine and bringing Palpatine back from the dead? And like, do you have like Palpatine ashes, or is that what we've got here? And that's how you're going to bring him back? And like, is that how we get Snoke? Like, I see this as the bridging series between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. So it's like, we're clearly going to get something there. And I even saw someone say that like Filoni is using this series to justify all of the problems with the sequel series. So it's like, I don't see Thrawn dying. No. I definitely think we're going to get a Shin versus Baylan confrontation where they have to fight each other out. I don't know if Ahsoka and the group will be abandoned on the planet. Like, that's the only part that I'm like, I don't know. Like, I could see it happening where they get left there, but I could also see them being like stowaways on the ship. But I'm like, no, the witches would sense that out, right? Like,
so who's dying next episode?
No one.
I feel like someone's dying.
Morgan?
That's what I was gonna say. That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say Morgan. For some reason, I feel like she's gonna die, and I don't know why. But I have a feeling.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, because she's been so like not really against everything that Thrawn's been saying, but just questioning everything.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I just see her, it's being the end of her usefulness, essentially.
Yeah, there's also like a story arc of like, you sacrificed everything to bring this evil back into the world, and he's like, what was it worth, right? You're dead. Like, that, I see that being the payoff. Like,
right,
you're dead. You're not getting anything. But I think Shin's. I don't see Shin living. In fact, I see Baylan killing Shin because like of a fight, and he's basically sitting there, and like that, him killing her or his confrontation with her costs him whatever he came to that planet for, and so he's like stuck on that planet for the rest of his life, dealing with the fact that he failed. Right? Like, I'm like, okay, that would be a cool ending for Baylan, in my opinion. Ezra lives, Ahsoka lives, Sabine lives. And realistically, where I would love for this to be and where it to end is for it to be on Coruscant, and everybody's just standing there and talking, and then you just see Thrawn's ship come into like the atmosphere, and everybody's like, "Oh and it just ends. I'm like, yeah, because you're like, oh my god, like it's going down, like the First Order is beginning,
Interesting. All right, we'll see. We'll see who's right.
No pressure. No pressure next week, Star Wars.
Yeah, no, it should be good. I'm excited for it. I think it'll be a good episode, and this whole series has been really good so far, I feel like. So
I agree. So you gave this one a 7?
7.5, I gave it.
Okay. I would give it a 8.5. It's not going to be the highest, but 8.5. One last thing before we close off, and this is Ahsoka theory. So I guess Ahsoka related. We saw the Stormtrooper reveal last week, right? And it was so epic, where we just see Thrawn and all the troopers on the ship and like that. Somebody pieced it together and included epic music over the top, and I brought it and I had to show it to you this week.
Did you?
Yeah.
Generals gathered in their masses, just like
it fits so good, man.
Destruction, sorcerer of death's construction. In the field,
little Black Sabbath.
Yeah, man.
As the war machine keeps turning.
What a great song.
Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord,
Now,
that was great.
Worth noting, if this was a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, that would have.
That's 100%. No question.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah.
That's good.
It would have been sick if that's how the episode ended, right? Is like we get that Black Sabbath and then him walking out, and you're just like, damn, but not Star Wars. Not Star Wars.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So. Still good.
Well, cool, man. We got one more episode of Tano Cast, and I'm sad. But I'm hoping it all pays off.
Yeah, I think it'll be good. It'll be good.
We just need to all go to bed tonight, understanding there's one more episode, and hold back the tears.
That's so weird. That's so weird to think about. It's okay, man. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, this has been such a great series, man. I love it. I actually enjoy this more than Kenobi. So I'm like, ooh, like, it's been good. I know.
My boy Vader, man, just seeing Vader so much and seeing him in that light in that show is just so good for me. So I can't put that
one scene of Kenobi justified the entire show, right? Like that whole just last showdown between Vader and Kenobi was so epic, and it was like, this show is worth it just from here, because that's what we all wanted. But I feel like with this, and I'm very interested to go through Clone Wars with you and Rebels with you, to then have the conversation of what did you think of Ahsoka? Because I'm like, being so invested in Ahsoka as a character, of like seeing the entire story arc, I'm like, man, this show was so good for me. It was that Kenobi moment for me all over again. So it's been fun.
Interesting.
Yep. So, all right. One last episode. We will see you guys next week. Until then, thanks for listening. May the Force be with you.
Always. Sorry. I was really hoping
keeping that in.
I was really hoping it would wait until after I said it, but it just came out immediately. Always. You guys have a good week.